This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on big push for infrastructure development in the country. The participants are A.K. Bhattacharya, economic analyst, and Deepak Kumar Dash, journalist.
Today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi laid foundation stone for two major projects which have huge religious significance in Maharashtra. Last week he was in Kedarnath. There also he made major announcements. So we'll talk about it. Mr. Bhattacharya sir, so today when we heard Prime Minister talking about not just one project, he actually talked about how India is making progress in every sector. He talked about former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee when he had said that if you build a road, then development comes. So in a way he is trying to put everything together to tell people that the focus of the government primarily on infrastructure, and among the infrastructure one of the major focus area is building highways. He also talked about how Jal Jeevan Mission is making huge progress, and obviously he also talked about a project which is very close to his heart, that is Swachh Bharat Mission. He said that I want to see Pandharpur as the cleanest religious place. How do you look at this entire approach of the Prime Minister and the government, bringing all possible infrastructure together to tell people, what exactly government is doing?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question in such an elaborate way, and I'm glad you referred to Atal Bihari Vajpayee, because there are similarities and there are areas in which the Prime Minister has taken the infrastructure initiative beyond what Mr. Vajpayee had done in his tenure as Prime Minister. The similarities are as follows. Both the Prime Ministers looked at infrastructure as a way to overcome a major deficit in the Indian economy. There is undoubtedly a huge infrastructure gap. And Mr. Vajpayee talked about roads, the quadrilateral highway project, trying to connect different parts of the country through motorable roads, and then monetizing them in a manner that more resources can be obtained from them to fund and finance more such projects. Mr. Modi has looked at infrastructure in a somewhat similar way, by which he, on the one hand, he wants to speed up investments in infrastructure areas, and on the other, he wants to also utilize the investments already made in these infrastructure areas and roads and airports, and then monetize them, so that the money that you get from such monetization, whether through the lease revenue or whether through the partial sale, and that money is used to create a virtuous cycle of more increased investment. But Mr. Modi's approach is slightly different in the context in which he has made this initiative. The context is in a scenario in which the COVID-19 pandemic has devastated the economy, and the Indian economy needs to come out of the debacle that it faced in the wake of 7.3% contraction of the economy. So one way out of this debacle in the Indian economy's output would be to sustain investments, and because that investment will probably help in sustaining growth through demand creation. So his entire approach is going beyond what Mr. Vajpayee did because of the context in which he has taken this initiative. Yes, infrastructure investment was needed, but it is even more needed because of the COVID-led contraction in the economy and the need to come out of this through more investment, therefore more demand and more jobs. Just one more point I would like to make in response to a question, which is that he had announced even before the COVID-19 struck the Indian economy and the people, the national infrastructure pipeline. Now that infrastructure pipeline was very ambitious. The outlay was 111 lakh crore, and over a period of 5 years has become an article of faith for the government, and indeed it has now seen a new dimension in the manner in which the Gati Shakti project is being laid out. So it's a comprehensive approach, more investment in infrastructure, which should create more jobs and which should create more demand, and therefore a sustainable growth trajectory can be ensured for the Indian economy.
You are right, sir. Today when Prime Minister talked about Gati Shakti master plan scheme, that he said that now we have a concrete plan in place, not just, taking projects in at one place, something is missing, but, a comprehensive approach is happening. Not just highways. He talked about how, this entire Jal Jeevan Mission, providing drinking water to every household, providing houses to the poor under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So if we see, in a way, he's putting the full package before people about his performance, the focus of the government, though we know that major focus is also particularly on highways, railways and other physical infrastructure, because that's more visible and that makes huge difference to our lives. How do you look at that even in occasions like this, when Prime Minister is addressing a particular event or a particular program, road which is being built for a religious tourism, same thing happened in Kedarnath. It is again a religious place. There also he talked about the Kedarnath will again rise up, and he said that the next decade will belong to Uttarakhand. Primarily he is bringing infrastructure, development, all these talks, even in such events. How do you look at this approach?
Well, this is the way you package your projects. In my view, this is politically an astute move in bringing infrastructure project closer to people. If you have looked at the manner in which Mr. Modi has implemented his economic policies, he has tried to connect the people with the outcomes of his economic policies. So therefore, he is trying to package an infrastructure project and initiative in a manner that people get benefit out of them, and those benefits are highlighted. Otherwise, what happens is that an infrastructure project becomes slightly remote, for people. Because if you're talking about a huge roads, unless you travel in that road, what benefit do you get? You may get the benefit in an indirect way, but there is no direct connect. What Mr. Modi is trying to do by using these occasions to talk about infrastructure is to create a connect between the people who will benefit from such projects directly or indirectly and sustain his economic agenda. So it's an astute and politically wise move on his part so that he gets the electoral dividends or the political benefits also out of what is purely an economic initiative.
What you talked about the outcome, that's the focus of Prime Minister. We have seen in past 4 or 5 years, and more so in past 2-3 years, he has been talking again and again about that this government believes in deadline and meeting the deadline. We know that there are many projects which are still lagging behind because of several reasons, whether it's non-availability of land, contractors issue, financial issues. But at least in a way, when he's saying that my focus is on achieving the target within the timeline, and we also know that in past 3-4 months he has taken several meetings, cabinet secretary has taken several meetings asking people why projects are getting stuck. How do you look at this change in the entire narrative? What government says that earlier it was all about starting a project, forgetting it, but now it's like starting and ending it within the deadline.
Well, the focus on meeting deadlines must be welcomed because as a country we have suffered from delayed projects. It is not that delays in projects execution have completely gone away, but closer monitoring has certainly seen that we are closer to those target dates as far as implementation or execution of those projects are concerned. And it is important that focus on meeting a deadline never gets diluted. What is important to note here is that while the Prime Minister is talking about and stressing the need for meeting deadlines, there are also some policy steps are also being taken to make sure that those project deadlines are met. For instance, only about a couple of weeks ago, the government decided to change the procurement plan on how it will procure items and everything for its various projects. Now, it is a well-known fact that the project delays take place not just because the contractor does not meet the deadline, but also because the procurement processes are plagued with delays because the methodologies that are used, the procedures that are used can often be discretionary and therefore subject to various decision-making processes, and that take time. What is now being intended is that instead of always following the L1 criteria, the government is now looking at what is called quality cum cost-based selection process, QCBS process. That will probably also help in expediting the execution of such complex infrastructure projects.
In past few days, we saw last week particularly Finance Minister taking a lot of meeting on capital expenditure. As you rightly said, a country which has been hit by COVID, the only way rather the best way to get out or to defeat that entire problem to increasing the public expenditure. How do you look at that this focus is getting much more bigger on capital expenditure, particularly by the infrastructure ministries like rail, road, then petroleum ministries?
There are two things that have happened in the last couple of months. One is that the finance ministry is closely monitoring the way the capital expenditure of the government is being spent. It's a fact that the annual target for capital expenditure, which is largely invested in creating assets and productive assets and projects, was supposed to go up by 26%, and it is maintaining a healthy rate. Although after the first 6 months, the share of capital expenditure in the total budget estimate for the year was a little less than 51%, around 41%, and it should have been more. But which is why the government is conscious that it must meet, not only meet, but probably exceed its capital expenditure targets if the infrastructure momentum has to be maintained. That is number one. Number two, as we mentioned earlier, about the launch of the Gati Shakti project. And the Gati Shakti project is not about identifying new projects, but executing projects through a digitally devised dashboard by which interministerial coordination does not become a liability or a cause for delay, but interministerial coordination is expedited and facilitated through a digital dashboard so that the project execution becomes less of a problem as far as meeting deadlines are concerned. So I think as a combination of factors that are at play, the government is conscious of the need for meeting projects on time, and it is also taking steps by which the deadlines are adhered to, but it is only a matter of time whether these steps actually start yielding the desired results, and only time will tell whether something more needs to be done or this is enough to meet those deadlines.
One interesting thing that we saw today during interaction of Prime Minister with people, rather his address to the people, he said that I want three things from you for this, two roads which are being built for religious purposes, particularly for pilgrims. He said that please, plant a tree in every few meters so that, a shady tree so that people can take rest. Then he said that people should provide water, create enough facility to, get drinking water for the pilgrims. And he said that these are the promises I want from you. These are the contributions you should make. While he's saying this, he said that I believe in Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. So that's the primary mantra, that everything has to be contributed by everyone. How do you look at this approach that in every speech or every address, Prime Minister tries to bring everyone as a partner or as a stakeholder in whatever he is doing?
I think what he is trying to achieve through that message is much more than Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. What he's trying to convey is a deeper message on the need for sustainable investment. When I say sustainable investment, it means investments that do not drain the natural resources and the environment in a manner that they become a liability for the generations to come. What is happening right now in large parts of the world is that development is often turning against people and our sustainability of our environment and forest and water resources. So essentially he is highlighting the need for ensuring development while remaining sustainable as far as the forest cover is required, the tree cover is required, the water availability is concerned. So I think this is a holistic way of looking at infrastructure and development, where infrastructure does bring about development and growth, but it should also bring about growth in a sustainable manner so that growth does not have a collateral damage for the environment or the forest or the water resources of the country.
You are right, sir. I think this is the message, primarily at a time when the entire world is talking about sustainability and how to, make the entire world sustainable. Thanks a lot, sir, for sharing your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Big Push for Infrastructure Development in the country. The participants were A.K. Bhattacharya, economic analyst, and Deepak Kumar Dash, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.